Hey everyone, welcome back to the Biotech Project. We're really happy to be joined today by another really fantastic guest, Mr. Brad Hartman, who Scott will introduce us to very shortly. As usual, you can always follow us at thebiotechproject.com and on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So be sure to look us up and come on out and listen. We can't wait. Let's kick this one off, Scott.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I can't wait to get through the intro. So let's just play it.
You want to break into and navigate your career in the pharma and biotech industry. We know how to teach you. This is the Biotech Project. From sales to medical affairs and everything in between, we're talking about it. No matter how you got here, from here to your next role is up to you, and we're here to help. You'll hear from guests in every role, from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. The Biotech Project. Here are your hosts, Scott Resnick and Dr. John Walsh.
All right. Welcome back to another episode. So I have to be honest, I am super, super excited to introduce Brad to our audience. So I have known Brad for 2 years now, and Brad is the Chief People Officer at a startup gene therapy biotech company. I hope I'm getting that right, Brad, called BBio, or BBioPharma, I think is the full name.
Yep.
Yep. Out of Massachusetts. And, but, you know, I think the big thing is just who Brad is, not only as a leader in HR and, you know, one of the, you know, the best people leaders, you know, I've come across, but somebody who's just so well-rounded in understanding what it means to, you know, to really, you know, care about people. Right. And I remember the first time we met Brad, you know, I heard the term Chief People Officer, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It must be one of those things trying to, you know, kind of just get a play on words. And then it all made sense after I got to know you. So, Brad, welcome to the Biotech Project.
Yeah,
Welcome, Brad.
hey, just a big thank you, John and Scott. I'm excited to be here. And yeah, you're not a human resource. You're not a number on a spreadsheet. You're not a means to an end. You're an end in yourself. And you know, being able to support individuals and bring a more humanistic, creative, modern, and just caring approach to building a company is the way I believe is the right way to do it, and I think where the world should be headed. And so excited to share some of that today, and also just to talk to you guys about not only my own career, but you know, I've seen literally. I think I was thinking when I came into I think I've interviewed around like 10,000 people in my life.
Wow.
You know, across, you know, the last 20 years, I spent a lot of time in talent acquisition, but then internally in HR, most of the companies that I've been working at have been rapidly scaling. And so like when you start to do the math on the number of interactions, but it's not just about interviewing, but seeing how people and hearing how people made different decisions through their career and how did those decisions turn out and what was meaningful for them and what worked and what didn't work. And everybody has different values and different priorities in life and different life experiences in terms of how they go through those different things. But it's a really interesting, you know, data set, and it's cool to get a chance to come to work and get to know people on a day-to-day basis. So happy to share whatever I can with you guys today, and excited to be here.
I appreciate hearing that. You know, why don't we just kick off, Brad? Give us your kind of your how your project took off. You know, what's your background? How'd you get into the role you're in now? You know, share with us.
Yeah, you know, honestly, you know, my story is one that has kind of a meandering to it. You know, in some ways, I felt like the feather in Forrest Gump a little bit. My degree's in neuroscience, so when I got to school, I thought I was going to go to medical school. Quickly figured out that as much as I cared about patients, I really didn't see myself becoming a doctor. And I was, well, what am I going to do with science? I really love science, and I applied myself towards research, and I thought I was potentially going to get a PhD. And I did enjoy the lab. I really did enjoy research. I worked at the National Cancer Institute in the Graduate School of Pharmacology during my undergrad. And but when I came out, you know, I wanted to combine business and science. And other than sales or business development, I didn't really know a lot of places where I could go. And frankly, and no fault of their own, it was back in like the late 90s, dating myself at this point. When I was coming out of college, the career services didn't really have like, oh, here's all the careers in biotech or pharma that you can go into that are outside of the research lab. So, I started interviewing for research positions. I ran into a recruiting firm who were all scientists who came out of the industry. And at the time, my brother had graduated from an MBA program, and I thought, I'll go do research for a couple of years. I'll get an MBA. I'll go to work at BCG or McKinsey. Maybe I'll go into business development. I'll go into marketing. I'll do something like that. But I'll combine business and science. And I did have a little bit of a sales background. I waitered my way through college at a restaurant and sort of was selling, high-end bottles of wine and those sorts of things. And when I came out, I was talking to this firm, and they were like, well, look, why don't you, kind of apply your passion towards business in recruiting? And I was like, Army recruiting? What are you talking about? Like, I don't want to do, like, what am I going to do? I didn't even know that was really a career. But then when they started to talk about what it was, they worked with 30 different biotechs, not just one. They worked in multiple disease areas. They worked from early stage research, which I was familiar with, but I didn't really know all the stuff that's involved, all the way through manufacturing and process development and quality control. And so to kind of get a landscape perspective on the industry at an early stage in my career, I thought that was really, really compelling. It was also highly entrepreneurial. I was a competitive athlete, so getting a chance to kind of earn what you kind of can kind of keep was really appealing. And what I didn't realize at the time, but the third component of my stool was not only just the science and the business element, but people, and really getting a chance to learn about people, getting a chance to really be able to make consultative matches between companies and individuals in a really thoughtful way. I really loved it. I did that for a number of years, was really successful, but decided I wanted to stretch and grow in new ways, continue to kind of harness recruiting, but went in-house in a biotech company called Dyax that was commercializing a drug in hereditary angioedema. They were building late-stage development at the time, but then starting to build their national commercial organization. And there was a really cool head of HR who was giving me the opportunity to grow and develop in learning and development and performance management and training in so many different arenas, and kind of as a mini HR business partner. And so I loved that experience of going into a small company and getting a chance with a great mentor and coach to expand into other areas. I went into an HR business partner role at Vertex. And I will say, I'll kind of pause here. I felt like I was at this point in my career where I didn't quite know where I was going. I was in the late start part of my 20s. I'd had some initial formidable experience. And I loved recruiting, but I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to do that for the next 40 years of my career, even it being like a head of talent acquisition or something like that. I enjoyed the broader areas of HR, but I questioned around, would HR really be the right long-term fit for me as a professional? And then the last path that I saw for myself was really around, do I want to become an entrepreneur? Do I just want to go launch a recruiting firm, be really successful for a number of years, and then, I don't know, like go do something else in life? And so I went into Vertex. We started building some of the commercial organization for Hep C and eventually for CF. And throughout that process, one of the strategies, I had a great coach and a mentor, and he's like, Brad, you know what? Go investigate these 3 different paths, meet people in each of these different areas, and start to get an understanding of, well, what are their life experiences and their career experiences. Make sure you talk to a couple of them, right? Because they're all going to have different stories and different things that they've, kind of discovered and how they felt about those things. And the more data that you have, the better decision that you'll make. And I remember coming back after a year, and I was talking to that mentor, and he was like, well, how are you thinking about the decision you're going to make? Are you going to stay and, kind of focus on TA? Or are you going to go into your own business? Or are you going to go back to school? Actually, the last path was go back to school and get an MBA and go do, sort of BD or something else. And, all of the tumblers came out on being an entrepreneur. And I remember saying to him, like, well, I could make this math work out any way that I want to. And he was like, well, because I did the decision tree analysis of all the pros and cons and weighting the factors and trying to kind of come up with this really analytical and structured method. I was like, it's all kind of like, fake math, so to speak. And he's like, yeah, but the fake math is telling you something, right? Like you're making it come out that way for a reason. And at the time I was engaged, was thinking about starting a family a number of years down the line. And so being an entrepreneur felt like it had a time-bound nature to it. I'll fast forward through the most other parts of my career in that I launched a firm, I scaled it, we got to a couple $1 million in revenue, we became kind of a leading life science search practice, which is a lot of fun. But my life changed enormously. My dad died of stage 4 cancer. We ended up moving up our kid timeline so he could meet my son. I decided that, scaling the business and the demands of that over time, it didn't, the financial windfall of successfully exiting my business wasn't what was meaningful for me. And getting a
Hmm.
chance to be with my family more and getting a chance to really show up as a husband and a partner in a more meaningful way was more valuable for me. And I got a chance to join a CAR T company that could potentially change cancer patients' trajectories forever. And that felt like it was a way more meaningful thing than, my company's going to do $3 million in revenue next year or something like that. Right. And so I took that
Sure.
chance and was really grateful to have it. I spent the last number of years working as a chief people officer, both in that early stage research setting, which I'm now back in at B, but I've also worked in later stage public setting for companies that are either like in phase 2B, phase 3, thinking about going commercial and bringing therapies to market and trying to figure out what are the different ways that we can really shape the culture, shape the organization into a both higher performing organization, but through the type of not only empowerment, but really just humanistic practices and sharing that we really do care about people. And the amazing thing about that in life is that if you show people you really care, they tend to bring that back to you, right? It doesn't always work out perfectly in terms of how that goes, but more often than not, the good nature of people will come through.
Brad, early on, you said that you meandered, and we talked about this a little bit before the show. How you meandered into your career, and I think many
Yeah.
people do that, right? It's not always this big linear pathway, and the resources weren't always there for you to have a clear roadmap of what it was. You kind of had to figure your way, and then later on, you mentioned a mentor. So I'd just be curious. This show originated for a lot of those same reasons, right? Because there isn't this roadmap, and having different people talk about their experiences helps provide example for others. So I'd just be curious about, what's your thoughts or advice that you could give to people about how do you evolve and meander, and how do you make use of people around you that can serve to be good mentors and sponsors in your career?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, like anything, I don't think there's one right answer, but I can tell you a couple of the ways that I think about it, or kind of a couple of my experiences. I always tell people who are early in their career, like you're in the kindergarten of your career, you should be eating paste and sort of doing finger painting, right? So I love and encourage individuals to explore. And I will say, look, there are awesome things you can get out of going to large companies and small organizations. One of the things that I love about going into a smaller company for someone early in their career is that you tend to get a broader scope and sort of insight into the way that things work. The advantage of a larger company is that you tend to get really good rigor in terms of going into a place that has just a lot of things, but you tend to be more limited because you're more of a, not a cog in a wheel, but you just see less. So I tend to really like that entrepreneurial environment, but that's kind of how I respond best. What I will say around the mentorship element is, one of the habits that I picked up early in my career was making sure I took time to go to what I thought would be meaningful professional development events. And so that meant showing up at a conference, or even just like we had a mass biotech HR council. I met the chief people officer of Vertex at that particular event. She was speaking on team practices. And after the event, I walked up with her because I just thought she was gong show awesome. I mean, she was super smart. She was crazy intelligent, and also just a great person. And I remember being so struck by her, and I was like, I came after her. I was like, can I buy you breakfast? I just kind of want to pick your brain because I had moved from being a recruiter into in-house HR, and I was trying to figure out, hey, I've never done this before outside of the recruiting component. How do I make sure that I'm successful and be able to take this on? And she was like, I want to buy you breakfast. And then she actually tried to pitch me on a job. I had just taken the position at Diax, but what ended up happening was that I told her very politely, hey, I committed to this company. I'm going to build it out. But what I want to do is, can I grab dinner with you every 6 months? And she was like, totally. Reach out to my executive assistant. We'll get a time. We stayed in touch. And 2 years later, she hired me at Vertex for a totally different job, right? After
Awesome.
Diax went through there. So, I mean, I will always also say that people should have their own personal board of directors. And everybody's going to have their own skill set in building those relationships, but fundamentally your ability to progress in life and your ability to make better decisions around your career are going to be shaped by having people who have different perspectives, who have different sets of experiences, and your board should evolve over time, no different than than an actual company's does, right? When you have a kind of group of people, maybe it includes somebody from the career center in your college, maybe it includes an academic professor, but that's one voice, right? Maybe there is a great recruiter that you're working with who seems to have a landscape perspective on the industry and has a real sensible way that they're not transactionally talking to you about a particular opportunity and trying to narrowly ram you into that one thing. And if you can trust them, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe there's a boss that leaves the organization you're working with that's just great. Or maybe there's a person in another department that's really awesome. How do you seek these individuals out? Find the people that really resonate? Because the truth is, most people are willing at least to grab coffee with you on like a semi-annual basis to just kind of check in and have a conversation. It's up to you to figure out the tips and the tricks to be able to make a meaningful impression. If people see value and if they see that you're doing it not just to sort of try to, do this to check the box, but that like you're genuinely curious, that you really are focused on, like any good sort of athlete, I'm going to show up and do the work that I need to do, right? Like they're going to be happy to spend that time if they see the value and the interest that's there. So, get
So
a board of
true.
directors, kind of bring some people into your experiences that can be helpful. Because the truth is, we all need guides. We all need people that are going to help us along the way. And my experience has been that if you're willing enough to look and put the time into it, you typically can find that.
Well said. Really true. It resonates a lot with some of the things that I've seen, both in my own experience, but with colleagues. So I think spot on, man. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think there were so many tidbits there that our audience. I mean, one of the things we're hoping to do is really help people figure out how to get to that next step. And I think sometimes people are afraid to put themselves out there and ask that question. Hey, can I pick your brain? Or here's something I'm interested in. Can I align myself with the way you've done things because maybe I can go that way, in the future. I think that's awesome.
yeah.
So,
And it looks like you got breakfast out of it too, which is even better.
I did. Yeah, absolutely. I did.
so let me. Some of the stuff you were talking about resonated in a bunch of different ways because we have, um, you've talked about kind of how you've evolved in your career, and now you've gone from really somebody who is in front of a bench to now somebody who leads people. And that's really what a lot of what we talk about, and we've had some guests on that are in medical affairs, and a lot of them, and just like John, have made the transition from either the bench or clinical practice into industry. But it was interesting to hear you talk about going from doing research into the business side of things, which is a different path. So quick question for you: we had uh, Andrea Pagnozzi on, was one of our first guests. She's a like a consultant who works with people who are trying to figure out their next steps, and she has a leadership and development background in industry,
Mhm.
and she does a lot of talking about this great resignation that we're going through now, and how really people are being sought after in a whole different way now. So, how is that affecting, at your level? What are the things that you think companies and good leaders should be doing to attract and retain good talent? And what are some of the things that it's okay for people that are looking to maybe make a jump to a newer organization to be looking for and expecting in organizations that really do, care about people?
Yeah. Well, look, different cultures and different companies are going to resonate differently for people, right? Like, and what I think is gong show awesome and what somebody else does, like, is probably going to be different, partly because we value different things, right? And that's okay. So I don't think there's a one size fits all thing. But what I will say is that I think, look, obviously it's great if organizations have competitive, and everybody needs to at a baseline have competitive pay and benefits. I think what, in my mind, doesn't typically solve the problem is adding another perk or thing to the bag, right? It's a lot more around the ethos. It's around, what do you really believe at the end of the day, right? Like, because the truth is, there is a lot of choice out there for people as they're going to look at companies. And most companies are going to pay them well, like, because pretty much everybody looks at the salary data and can be fairly competitive. And like, look, you can probably get 5K to go work or 10K to go work somewhere else for a very similar level of position if that's what's really meaningful for you. But it's kind of sometimes at some point it's a rate limiting thing. The biggest thing that I think is important for somebody as they're thinking about a job is the manager. At the end of the day, your manager determines so much of your experience. And a great manager outperforms a great company in so many ways. If you go to a great company and you've got a B or even C manager, I would go to an average company with a gong show manager in a heartbeat in my career. And sometimes, like that shiny resume of the company, like premiumly financed, like they have like the best scientific data, all of this stuff seems to be sort of like the bells and whistles, and it kind of feels like whatever your car of choice is. I don't know, Tesla, Maserati, whatever. It seems like it is that high end experience. Your day-to-day experience in your job is really going to be your team and your manager, right? And so who are the people that really make your experience up, and what do they care about, and what do they value, and how do they go through things, and trying to get as much of a sense, because the problem oftentimes in job searching is you're talking to a manager that you don't really know. And so it's like, all right, well, you sound good in the interview, but like, what are you really going to be like when I actually get into a challenging situation with you, or when you're stressed as a manager because you're under pressure and you've got to be able to work with me in a situation? How are you going to respond? And so if you can talk to other people that have worked with that person, that's helpful. I think a great sign of a leader is usually somebody that's willing to say, like, hey, here's a couple of people who have reported me in your past. And where they have more than one or two, because just like references, they're going to give you like the really nice examples that that are there. But the more that you can really understand that experience is there from a company perspective. Again, for me, it comes more to ethos than the specific offering of what the benefit is, right? Like, how do you really show me that you care? We were going through today's International Women's Day. And one of the things that, whether it's Valentine's Day or International Women's Day, I don't like the idea of yes, it is a moment. It's important to reflect on this particular day, to honor the women that are in our lives and how they've impacted us, and to support them, and to understand that gender bias and inequality exists. And we need to do meaningful things, but I care far more about what are you actually doing than what do you say, right? So like all these posts on social media that are like, well, we support this day, whoopity doo dah. Like, what do you actually do? And the same thing's true for your people practices. Like, if your answer is, well, you pay me well and you give me another little bit benefit, everybody does that, or everybody can do that. The question really is, what are the things that you do underneath that, or behind that, in terms of what do you believe? Like, and all of those things, those values and those beliefs will drive different behaviors, and it'll change your experience. I mean, like you were saying earlier, Scott, in terms of what you experienced at Fairgene, like it's not an accident that stuff happened. It wasn't just a series of things we did to try to produce an outcome. It really came from a system of beliefs. And the truth is, you felt that, right? Like, that wasn't something that came across as like, oh, we're doing this so we get something back from you, versus like, this is just the way that we believe that a company should be run. And like, at the end of the day, we're here to support, empower, and enable the organization to go out and unleash the great capabilities that it has. It's not going to be a utopia. We're not going to walk on water. This place isn't sort of devoid of conflict. We're going to have problems. Life is real. It's not some sort of utopian society. But in the midst of all of that, like, I can show empathy, right? I can extend, like, COVID happens and I'm driving down to New Jersey to sort of spend a couple of minutes walking outside with employees, versus just like sitting in my apartment and hopping on a Zoom to say, you know what, that's one way I can show you that I really care, that you're not getting a chance to interact with real humans outside of your family right now. How do I show up? How do I show you that? Like, that's what I really care about.
Brad, you talk about ethos, right? And the culture really about a particular company. And there's the old expression, right? Culture eats performance for breakfast. And I really have always believed in that. I think it's so true. I think a motivated group of people who are passionate about what they do, and it's clear to me, and I hope to the people who are watching and listening today, that you're passionate about what you do. So as you're thinking about how to design a culture, how to foster a culture, how to bring passion to that culture, what is it that you're passionate about that you say Brad has to bring to the table that you think designs that really optimal culture? And how do you get people really to think about it, to buy into it, so they don't just believe it's just the next party line, right? It's the next thing, because it's clear, like I said, you're passionate about what you do. So how do you get people to understand that passion?
Yeah, so what I heard come through from you is a couple of things. One was, how do you get people to buy into it, and then how do you design it in a way that, uh, as that last question alluded to, that people are motivated by that. And the answer to it is actually in the design itself, which is that you got to enable the people to design, right? Everybody has to have a voice in creating that culture, because the truth is, culture is something that the entire organization owns. It is the collective expression of the actions people take that live out the beliefs and the values that you espouse to. You can say, I can't remember the four values of Enron, but it was like, integrity, transparency. I can't remember what it was, but it's laughable when you look back on like what actually came out of the
True.
experience. You can say a whole bunch of stuff. If it don't show up day to day, it don't really mean anything, right? It's just words on a wall, on a T-shirt, on a website. It's basically not, sort of what the actual experience is. The real culture is, what are the values and how are those expressed, and who's hired, who's promoted, who's let go, and how we just show up day to day to help support one another. Like what are our interactions like every day? It's built brick by all of us. And so the idea that like executive teams go off and then come back to everybody and say, well, here's what our values are. That's a culture of compliance. And people will
Yeah.
follow that because at the end of the day, they want to get recognized for stuff, right? So it works, but it doesn't really work, because the truth is nobody really was a part of co-creating it. And the truth is, all of us, or most of us, when we come to companies today, we're actually owners, right? We get stock in these organizations. And we're putting a lot of our heart and soul, like most of the people that I work with, just like show up to work for a paycheck or like check the box. Most people are pretty dedicated in their lives and their careers. Partly it's the type of organizations that I go to work for. But the point is, if you're going to give that much of your heart and your soul into an enterprise, you sure as crap should have a voice in how the thing operates. And culture is really how it operates. That's the operating system. That's the OS of how the organization really makes decisions and kind of goes about stuff and how it interacts. So you get everybody together in a room and you talk about, what do you really value? And the truth is, like, that conversation is way harder than you want it to be. Like, you think it's sort of this weird, fluffy, it's not like a, sort of teddy bear HR conversation. It's really like, what do you seriously in your life value? Let's be real about what works for you, what you want in your work experience, what's here today, and then what do we aspire to be? Because it's okay to be a little bit aspirational. It's not okay to say, we're going to try to be so aspirational that when people come in and interview with us, or when people show up on their first day, that what they get is like, 180 degrees different in terms of what the experience is. So everybody's got to have a voice. And by creating it together, you tend to see it expressed, and then trying to figure out what are the ways that you actually reinforce that with other practices. So, Scott, you'll remember from Fairgene, one of the practices we did was a recognition system. And this wasn't just sort of a catchy way to do sort of kudos to everyone. One of the things that was there is that we defined specific behaviors, and we had people call out those specific behaviors in their recognition in a really super easy, simple digital app and all that fun stuff. And you could
Yep.
customize the marketplace and everything else. But the point was, we could actually run analytics at the end of the year to say, not just, we had patient-centered excellence of one of our values, how often was that displayed? But we could break down the specific behaviors of patient-specific excellence and say, here's how many times the sales group did that. Here's how many times the medical affairs group did that. And take a look at where those things were being expressed and say, hey, do we really value this stuff? Because if we do, we should be doing it more. Or, as I like to say to the current team, because we're doing this practice at B currently, we literally just this past week rolled out that practice. And I typically don't like going back to a playbook that I've done previously, but it's not just that it worked so well, but it's really the best solution to the problem that I've seen, which is, how do we really visually display all the cool stuff that's happening that's amplifying our values in the organization? And if we're not doing certain things, either we have a skill gap, like we have a value at BBio around habitual candor. I'll be honest, I had a conversation the other day with the CEO, and she was talking to me and she's like, we need to make sure everybody has a mindset that habitual candor is something that's expected. And I was like, totally agree. At the same standpoint, we're a very early stage scientific company. A lot of our staff are in their first or second job out of school. I don't know about you, but I didn't come wired out of the womb for conflict, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I'm a more introverted person, or frankly, even if I'm extroverted, if I go into a conversation with somebody in power and I have to give them difficult feedback, it's a real high stakes conversation, and it has real high stakes in terms of like if it doesn't go well, right? So it takes high skill and it has high impact. My experience in life is most people don't attempt to do that stuff
Yeah.
unless they feel good. So we have to train people. And so we're going to take the time this year to actually go through and train people on productive conversations and giving and receiving feedback. And that's not going to be a panacea. They're not going to go from being like okay at it to being a hero in a day or in a month. But if the expectation is you're going to do this without us actually really working on it and practicing it, good luck. You can espouse that, but it's not going to show up in the culture. So it's a long-winded way of saying I think the most important thing is make sure you bring everybody into the conversation about culture. You facilitate that dialogue, and then you routinely check in. You show that you really care about it. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you're going to do it once. It never gets touched. It goes by the wayside. And the only time it shows up is at the year-end reviews when people are trying to make a magically delicious story in their review of like, here's how I lived out that value. Check the box. Give me the credit. And that's what you're not really trying to sort of create.
But and not only that, I think as a participant in that, when we first rolled it out, it was like, okay, now you got to start thinking about these things because you want to make sure you're highlighting people, right?
Yeah.
But then as you're doing it, you're like, you start to kind of live it, and on top of that, everybody likes feedback, right? Everybody likes positive feedback. Everybody likes, let's face it, most people in our industry are A-type personalities who are very driven for success, and they tie in their personal success with that means they're helping patients, and that's the most, the way this synergy in our industry works out the best. I think it was the old CEO of Merck that would say that if you do what's right by patients and you really focus on that, success
The
follows.
rest will follow. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but doing these things when you would have this recognition and see the positivity, and then you would make it part of your everyday, just what you did. I mean, those are the little things I think that are so special about the way, um, an organization could look at things, little things like that. I mean, um, I always said, oh, I don't need all the gifts from the company and everything. But then when you join a company, and maybe you're new and you have nothing that says you're part of that company, like a shirt you can wear or something, and then suddenly you get it, it creates a connection to that company. Or you have a mug, like we have our Biotech Project, mugs. It's just like it connects us to,
Yeah.
what we're doing. And I think that you know, better organizations have I read a great white paper on the concept of, oh, we're a family as an organization. And the discussion in the white paper was that's just not true. That's almost silly to say because family is, blood. Family will, always come together and do right. Businesses can't always do that as much as you want to, right? And I think a company that has to dissolve or lay off people is a perfect example, right? But community is really what should be looking to be formed and to move towards that community, approach. And I think that that's something that our industry can do a better job in certain areas with, and certain, I think, roles are starting to do that now with this shift since COVID happened, and trying to bring people together that are really committed to, the goal of the organization.
Yeah, and it's amazing how little things make a difference, Scott. There's a cool book. It's called Scaling Up Excellence, and they talk about design thinking and principles. And like, there's weird stuff that you would think never has the impact that it does. So, like for example, if you go onto a train car and it has a lemon scent to it, the trash in that car goes down by like 70%. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's like startling, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, if I asked you to bet on like how much it would go down, like you would think it's like 20 or 30. And the point is that there are subtle cues, there are subtle nudges, there are subtle ways. It's not about manipulating your behavior. What it's doing is like no different on the recognition front, is like, hey, look, when you get up in the morning, I'm just trying to give you a protein shake. Like, you're telling me you want to be healthy. I'm just here to help support and to amplify that, right? I'm not trying to tell you to be healthy when you don't value that, right? Like we've created these values together. And now it's just how do I help support and amplify the things that are already there? And the truth is, it does. It changes your mindset, it shifts your behaviors. And we do all want to be recognized. We want to be seen, right? Um, I'll share this because it's my fundamental people belief. And if other people borrow it, as Picasso said, great artists, good artists borrow, great artists steal. I didn't steal it, but the principle is we all have five needs as human beings beyond air, food, water, shelter. I mean, you can go to a number of different hierarchies for it, but the five that I focus on are connection, variety, growth, contribution, and what's the last one? Connection, variety, growth, contribution, stability is last. So those are the five. And my role as a chief people officer is how do I help to meet your needs? I will not always be able to give you what you want, promotion, more money, whatever it might be. But if I can meet your need, if I can help you grow better than another organization can, if I can give you more variety within your day-to-day job, if I can help make you feel a contribution to something bigger than yourself, right? If I can give you stability, which I can't always give you stability in biotech, but if I'm really transparent with you, transparency creates trust. It creates a form of stability, even in absence of that. Like I can't control external events, but I can control the ways that I respond to them and how I treat you as a part of that, right? And again, I don't do it for necessarily an outcome, but the goal is how do I think about the ways that I can create practices in the organization to better deliver on these needs as a way to create more engagement, a better organization, a better experience for you as a human being, not just as a customer, right? In terms of you're a customer or the employee experience of the company, which is important. But
No, very true.
So, yeah, I just what are some of the trends that you're seeing, going on in our industry? Where are the places that you see really expanding? As people are trying to figure out their next steps, maybe they're saying, you know what, this world's a crazy world right now. I want to go for my dream opportunity. I want to move on to something new. I want to expand my horizon. What are the things as a chief people officer, see as kind of the places to, that are expanding and growing? And it can be across the board: commercial, reimbursement, government affairs, the business side. I mean, what are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of different opportunities. Like when I look at where the biotech industry is and where it's headed, I mean, look, we're in a little bit of a not a turbulent time, but I would say a pullback, is not just in terms of the macro economy, but I think the public biotech market has already experienced a little bit of a shock, and I think it's going to continue to, not just the NASDAQ broadly speaking, but biotech over the next little bit. How long that'll last, we'll see. What I can say is, like, when I look at the broader fundamentals of the rate of change of technologies, for so long all we had were large molecules and small molecules, antibodies and sort of pills, and now we have RNAi therapeutics, we have cell-based therapies, multiple types of cell-based therapies, different types of gene therapies that are out there. There's new modalities, there's next generation CRISPR technologies, there's all these things that are spawning not just one company, but multiple organizations, right? And so the level of change, and you combine that with big data, increases in computing and automation that are out there, the speed at which we can kind of prosecute things because of an economy of scale, the future for biotech and the capital that's out there, that has been out there. I mean, holy crow, we raised more capital during the year of the pandemic than we had in any other year in biotech's history, right? So we don't have a capital problem. We don't have an idea problem. The biggest problem we have is human capital, right? And so there are so many different fields, but if I had to break them down, largely speaking, on the research side, gene editing is a very hot field. Immuno-oncology continues to be just an unbelievable space with a ton of investment that's out there. When I think about the commercial arena, I think a PharmD is such an amazing degree, whether somebody wants to go be an MSL, because the truth is, I think over time, largely speaking, sales isn't going away. I think it's going to be changing a lot. And the changes in sales and the efficiency gains about virtual visits and those sorts of things that, again, we are going to be going back to a hybrid universe. But it means that there's still going to be downward pressure more than likely on sales reps going into office. And a lot of the therapies that are coming out are not the, pods of the past, but are very highly specialized, smaller forces. People who have great experience and great relationship with offices are going to continue to be highly employable because offices are going to be closing down. They already have been for years in terms of access.
Yeah.
So people who can get in are going to be highly employable. But market access is going to continue to be incredibly important. Health economics is such an amazing field. If somebody gets a degree in health econ, like they're going to be employable for years. On the clinical side, almost all areas of drug development, regulatory, particularly regulatory for cell and gene therapy, because it's such a different space, regulatory for oncology is going to continue to be very, very big. People who work in clinical operations, like the number of clinical trials that are happening today and that are going to continue to go through, like there's just a lot of studies to prosecute. So I think we have a rich ecosystem. Again, there's some near-term potential turbulence with the public markets, but when I look at the next 4, 5, 10 years, like we're going to see quantum leaps. We already have. Like we can make cancer disappear from a patient's body through CAR T therapies, and it's gone 10 years later. And these are people who had no other hope. This is the fourth line of their therapy, and they had massive sort of tumors throughout their body, and they no longer have anything. I mean, that is just awesome, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that cancer is going away in the next decade or like we're going to cure Parkinson's in that timeline. I hope we do. But the point is like the level of leap, the things that we're able to unlock, like the potential for all of this is enormous. And we have challenges, right? Like whether it's from drug pricing or whether it's in relation to the global economy and stability, and hearts and thoughts with the people of Ukraine. And I hope all of that stops as soon as it possibly can. But I would just tell you there's so many different rich places in biotech right now. What I would encourage individuals to think about is I don't think of your path as sort of like a linear rise to the top. I think there's so much beauty in getting breadth because you get to explore different things and you are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I mean, I can tell you when I left Vertex and I started my own enterprise, there was a thought in my brain that I had just spent 2 years going up the HR business partner ladder, and now I was leaving to become an entrepreneur, and I could have done that 2 years earlier. And that not that that experience was a waste, but that I could have done a better job of making those decisions, or I would have been better served by going in earlier to it. And the truth is, the skills that I got as an HR business partner may be so much better as an entrepreneur. The relationships that I built with the commercial groups at Vertex became some of my best clients in the recruiting space. And then more importantly, when I decided to leave recruiting, which I didn't think of at the time, and I came back in house, I would have never gotten a job as the head of people for a biotech had I not had that experience as a sort of HR business partner. So things that in the moment can seem suboptimal or I made a mistake, you're going to make some mistakes, and that's okay because it's going to teach you something if you let it, right? And life is not like, look, you could look at my career and say, oh, you're successful, you're a chief people officer, you've risen to the highest position, you've gotten a chance to work with some really amazing CEOs. I love my boss at my current place and our executive team. They're such a great group. I'm very, very blessed. The truth is, man, like I had a bunch of failure. I've had a lot of companies that I joined that, through no fault of my own, the phase 3 trial didn't work out. And I took that risk. I'm a risk taker in my life. I like to climb super high mountains. Like I pushed the envelope in a lot of different ways. And they weren't foolish decisions. In fact, they were very strategic decisions. But the outcome didn't actually end up going forward. As my executive coach likes to say, good decision, bad outcome. I can't control the outcome. Sometimes people in life make bad decisions and they get great outcomes. And we look at that, we're just like, well, wow, they must like have just an amazing life experience. And the flip side is also true. Again, it doesn't feel good in the moment, but those experiences are there to teach you something. And usually the fear, the ego, the pride, the loss that I experience in those moments where I'm like, woe is me. There's all these other people that are kind of cruising in their careers that haven't had as many career transitions. How do I make sure that that doesn't happen again? If I start leaning into fear, I end up making decisions that don't really serve me. Right? I need to make it from decisions of strength, like what's going to do there. And the truth is, if I'm a great human being, if I'm a great professional, my work product and my ability to show up every day is going to carry way more weight than if the organization ended up having a successful outcome. I can't be unmindful of my tenure and my track record and what I deliver, but those two things aren't always correlated.
And Brad, you talk about tenure and track record. So if you have to look at where you've been and where you're going, if you had to sum a few things up and said Brad is most passionate about fill in the blank here, what would that be? What drives you? What makes you so passionate to do what you do?
I think a couple of things. I mean, I think the first thing is that like on a day-to-day basis, like, look, I don't know, is tomorrow my last day here on earth? Is a week from now? Like, nothing's guaranteed, man. I've lost so many people to cancer in my life, and I've had so many things that have happened that I think what I try to focus on is how can I bring my spirit into the world in a way that impacts others in a positive way. And one of the conduits I do that is through work, right? And trying to give into a community. I also love helping people in their careers. So, like, I love doing things like this, where if there's any sort of tidbit or thought nugget that ends up being helpful to someone, like, that's great. And I love helping teams and organizations achieve more than they think is possible. And so, if I can help people unlock that and help patients at the same time, like I tell people when they come to work at our company, we're not trying to help you to like make more potato chips and sell more potato chips this year. No offense to the people who work in the CPG industry, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're like really trying to fundamentally change medicine and impact patient lives in a really good way. And we'll see how the science ends up playing out. I think B has just remarkable potential, but um, what lights me up is how can I impact people in a positive way, and how can I bring more of a soulfulness into corporate America? Because I think for so long that's been missing. That certainly wasn't my experience early in my career, and I think the world is starting to really see that and to really value that and say, to Scott's earlier point, this is a community, right? And we are a team. It is a business. Like, we still have to be able to pay the bills and run and be
Yep.
thoughtful around things, and we may have to let people go at some point if things don't go that way. We'll be really thoughtful and strategic in how we plan. But um, how do we bring that soulfulness into corporate America? It's a
Absolutely.
really interesting challenge, because I
Yeah.
can tell you, like, you run into boardrooms and not everybody agrees with you, and that's where it becomes a really interesting conversation of not just finding the right leader, but if you have a great CEO, if you have a senior leadership team who are aligned with you, you're never going to get everything you want in life or in your own experience, but you're probably going to get a lot of it, and that's what I'm most focused on.
Awesome.
Hey Brad, we're at like 48 minutes, and I knew this was going to be a challenge, but I did want to take a few last minutes here. One of the things I know that has always been a passion of yours, and I'd love to give you a chance to talk about it and maybe give some tips of resources for folks, but diversity.
Yeah.
In the workplace and in our industry has always been something that's it's talked about a lot. Like you mentioned, you can put a post that says something, but action is speaks louder than words. I'd love to open the floor to you on diversity in our industry and kind of your thoughts on that, and maybe some resources for folks that could be used.
Yeah. So look, I'll say I'm a student of this, and it's an area that I approach, with humility as a person of white male privilege, right? But when I came to be a chief people officer, something that was important to me is just how do we make sure that this is something that we don't just check the box on? When I walk at home to my kids, can I really say to my daughter, the way that we're supporting and trying to actively develop women within the company is something that I can really be proud of. So I would kind of go back to, if you're thinking about how, as a professional, you can join an organization that really cares about it, it's really getting an understanding of how their leaders talk about this. What is the organization's current practices? How do they really show up to support it? One thing I would put a plug in for, there's a program. It's called We Rise Together. It's a program that I built along with a good friend of mine, and that B Bio is championing along with that organization called Haven, which is focused on accelerating the growth of director to VP level women, minorities, individuals with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ plus community throughout the Boston area. We hope over time we can actually expand this program into other biotech ecosystems. But it's a 9-month program that includes some professional development training. It also includes executive mentorship for a 6-month period from a person of another company. And so there's a great kind of pay it forward model that happens. It's our second year. We just kicked off the first cohort. If people are interested in getting involved in the program for the second cohort, it's in the June timeframe. We only have a couple spots that are open, but as we go towards 2023, if individuals want to find out more about it, there's a great video on the social media page for BBio, kind of talking about the program and how you can get involved. I will also say there are tremendous resources at the Mass Biotech Council. There's a great woman there who champions their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, who has been instrumental in helping to illuminate who are some of the different organizations that we can partner with to make sure we're attracting really diverse talent, right? So we have partnerships with West, Women in the Enterprise of Science and Technology, BWise, Black Women in the Science and Engineering fields, Neboche, Latinos in Biotech, OutBio. There's a whole host of different organizations, different diversity job boards that we have partnered with. And I think the other thing I will say, when I came into B, even though I've done a ton of work in this area, and I think, Scott, as you think about your experiences at Fairgen, you'd be like, wow, we did a lot of stuff around that. When I came into B, our CEO really pushed me, and she's like, Brad, like, let's pull together our diversity strategy. And I really want to push you on not just what you've done before, but what are the ways that we can move it forward? And I took a small amount of capital, and I got a chance to work with two amazing women at New Black Consulting. I'll put a plug in for them. And they actually helped me think about what are the ways I can think about diversity in a way that actually creates programming that aligns with moving the organization from where we are today and our understanding of diversity to where we're hoping to be over the next 4 or 5 years. And I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. And so that's the last bit of advice I would give is go to the Mass Bio. You can get a lot of really great insight into ways that you can partner around talent diversity. How are you making sure that your search firms are organizations that are aligned with your philosophy around diversity? And then also, how are you weaving this into your other business practices around how you approach clinical trials? How do you approach your facility design? What are the ways that diversity access for individuals with disabilities? How many minority or women-owned businesses are supplying things within your office, right? Or that are talent acquisition vendor partners with you, right? So thinking about it from multiple levels. But I think it's a really important area to invest. And typically it's underinvested. And it's more a check the box. We're going to do an unconscious bias training. Don't get me wrong. Those things are great. They're important. We all have bias. We need to be cognizant of it. What will lead to more lasting change is really getting someone in who can help your organization navigate to where it is. And part of that will come from people valuing it, right? If they value it, they'll seek it out. They'll start to do some stuff in it.
Yeah, I would love for you, not to put you on the spot, but maybe we can get you back with some of your colleagues in that side of things
Sure.
to come in and we can do an episode just talking about that because I think there's a lot we can do as an industry there, and not just a lot we can do, but quality stuff that we can do for folks. So love to hear about
Yeah,
it.
completely agree. Well, look, I have to run, but all I can say, it was an awesome conversation. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I can talk about sort of people's careers I really enjoy being of service. So I hope there's something in the midst of all of this that is helpful to your listeners out there. Again, thank you for the time today, Scott and John. It was great to get to meet you, and we'll look forward to coming back, whether on diversity or something
Yeah.
else in the future.
Well,
Likewise.
thank you for
Thanks, Brad.
joining us. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks everybody for listening. This was a great episode, Brad. Can't say how much I appreciate you joining us. All right, everybody, don't forget, listen, share, like, and all that, and we'll catch you next time.